as a retirement advisor for over 20 years now, I can share with you, in my experience, the number one reason that people that could retire financially, why they don't retire. And unfortunately, it's a myth. 80% of the time, it is not going to be that person's reality. So, what is this myth? The myth is, I'm going to be bored. If I retire, I'm going to be bored. I like my job. I'd rather go to work and feel productive than retire and be bored. And yes, of course, if you were going to be bored, if you were going to be sitting around, if you were going to wonder, I don't know what I'm going to do all day, yeah, that's not a good situation. But you know what? Over 80% of the people that I've worked with get into retirement, make the transition, and they look back and say, I really wish I had done this sooner. I'm delighted that I retired when I did, and I like my new life now better than my old life. So let's not let this myth hold us back. So one thing to think about is every unhappy retiree that I know is unhappy in their own unique way. But every happy retiree that I know is happy in very similar foundational ways. So in today's video, I want to share with you what those foundational ways are so that you can increase the likelihood that you're going to be whistling every day and having fun and looking back, being part of that 80% that is looking back and saying, I really wish I had done this sooner. So what's the first thing? The first thing is to find your new purpose. Now that's gonna take time, right? And whether that new purpose is, I like hanging out with my family. I like hanging out with my friends. I like going for walks with my dog. It could be as simple as that. Or it could be as complicated as, you're heading up a capital fundraising campaign for your church or a local not-for-profit. And it takes a fair amount of effort. In some ways, it's kind of your new work, right? Whether it's simple or more complicated, having a purpose. Now, unfortunately, a lot of folks will say, you need to retire to something. And I think that's good advice, but the unfortunate part of that is, it's often hard to figure out what that new thing is going to be before you retire. And I think it's great if you can figure it out ahead of time, but don't let it steal years away from your retirement because you're waiting to figure out what that new thing is going to be. Sometimes you need time, sometimes you need to hit reset in order to figure out what that new thing is going to be. And let's say you're financially able to retire at 55 or 57 or 60. If you think about it, at 60 years old, most of us are only going to have 1,000 weeks of healthy active time. And it would be a shame to not take advantage of the healthiest and most active 100 weeks or 200 weeks because we're thinking, I don't know what my next purpose is going to be. There is a process to it. And if you're willing to invest the time and commit to it, you will find a new purpose. Like I said, over 80% of folks. And part of it is a mindset to be thinking about retirement not as being set out to pasture, not as a destination, but as a new life. It's a new chapter of your life. And for many people, it can be the happiest and most rewarding chapter. And in fact, there's been studies that have been done on happiness. And what they find is people in their early 20s, before they have the responsibilities of a mortgage, of a family, of saving for retirement, saving for college, they find that people in their early 20s are the happiest. And then, frankly, as responsibilities start to come onto our shoulders, their happiness tends to start going down. But the nice thing is, if we have kids, as our kids get older, as there's less work for us, it's enormously rewarding work. But as rewarding as it was, as fun as it was, I lived my days swimming in love when my kids were young, but I went to bed exhausted. And now, unfortunately, I don't get to see my kids as often, but I have a lot more freedom, and I can focus on some of the things that I'm excited about doing, right? And what I enjoy doing and what you're going to enjoy doing in retirement may be very, very different things, but we have the freedom to begin to develop that. And so what scientists find is, ironically, when our kids are young and we're going to bed exhausted, even though we're swimming in love, our happiness factor tends to be low, and then it starts going up. And it keeps going up until about 70 or 75. So know that you have good company, and everybody at some point we're all going to transition into retirement at some point, unless we're going to work until we die. And I don't think many people watching this video are thinking, hey, Azul, I'm looking forward to working until I die. And if you're somebody like Warren Buffett, who's in his 90s and is one of the wealthiest guys in the world, I mean, he's the poster child of somebody that doesn't have to work. But be careful, because you can look back in hindsight, and once your health is lost, your health is lost, and say, why didn't I take advantage of the time that I could have taken advantage of and retired and pursued these new dreams? So unless we're going to work until the day that we die, we all have to go through this transition at some point. So this idea that we're going to be bored, I think for a lot of folks, costs them at least a year of retirement, often 2 or 3 years. And the 4 most dangerous words for a soon-to-be retiree or a would-be retiree is just 1 more year. And frankly, you're just kicking the can down the street. And yes, of course, the numbers look better if we work 1 more year. But the question is, A, are we using it as an excuse because we don't know how to do that transition? And B, what are we giving up? What are we sacrificing for that just 1 more year? You could be and likely are sacrificing something enormously important, which is one of your healthiest and most active years in retirement. Unfortunately, for most of us, when we're 60 years old, we have less than 1,000 weeks of healthy, active time in front of us. And that's not a lot of time. So to give up 100 of those weeks, or even 50 of those weeks, 1 more year, can be enormously valuable for us. And what are we really getting from that? So 2 books that I think help with this. One is a book called Die with Zero, which talks about these time buckets, talks about a lot of nice topics for people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. But one concept is this idea of time buckets, that there's times in our lives when it makes more sense to try to do things. For instance, I learned to surf in my 50s, right? That's a time bucket thing. It'd be really hard. I could probably do it, but it'd be really hard to learn to surf in my 70s. So that's one thing. Excuse the noise, there's a helicopter coming over. Another book that I want to share with you is From Strength to Strength by Arthur Brooks. And it talks about these different transitions in our life and how to transition, because one of the best things that we can do is to be prepared for retirement before we can financially afford to retire, so that when the time comes, we can take full advantage of it. And that's why I made this video up here, which are 7 things that I want you to think about, stop doing in your 50s and 60s in order to enjoy those ages more until the time comes to retire. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.